J.W. Mercer's firstborn son was William Kinsey Mercer, my great-grandfather, and he's the first one that I actually remember clearly. He lived with us when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I really don't know whether it's for a few days or a few weeks, but it seemed like a while. I think he lived with my dad's sister, Aunt Emily, my cousin Kenneth, who's my age, around the same time, because we have both similar memories. We thought Kinsey was just the absolute coolest of all cool people. He was a Jack Palance looking guy to us, a really tough looking old man, thick white hair and square jaw, rugged appearance, and he always smoked a cigar, and he always wore cowboy boots, which we thought was really cool when we were 4 or 5, because nobody else did around us. And he had a cane, and even his cane seemed incredibly cool to us. We both wanted a cane. Kenneth remembers him getting him to eat his sweet peas by putting them in a little nest of mashed potatoes and telling some cowboy story where the sweet peas represented stray cattle that had to be rounded up, and neither Kenneth or I liked sweet peas, but Kenneth was happy to devour them when Kinsey made it about cowboys and rounding up cattle. Kinsey would be the one who gave this gun to Jasper, his son, and told the story about it. And I still have it now, so if it doesn't last as long as the video does, you'll know it did really exist. Kinsey was a genius. He had very little formal education, but I talked once to a first cousin of Jasper's, my grandfather, who was a civil engineer, and he said Kinsey was one of the most remarkable mathematical geniuses he'd ever seen. He said he could do amazingly complex mathematical calculations almost instantly in his head. He was an inventor. There's a popular candy in Texas and surrounding region of the country called peanut patty that he invented. It's round, and evidently it's round because when he first made them, he used some kind of rubber ring from a car motor. He was also a master mechanic, and he used that ring to pour the candy into. He was trying to make peanut brittle, and it turned out a little too soft and became the peanut patty. He also supposedly invented a train engine that could be run by 2 people at a time when most train engines required 5 or some larger number of people. His invention that we talked most about, or that I heard most about as a kid, was the cotton picker. He was reputed to have built the first mechanical cotton picker, and we actually have a picture of him with that. I've got it on the computer, him sitting on that machine, and his handwriting on the back, which I also scanned, that is telling somebody, this is me and my machine, you can keep this picture. So I have his handwriting. The tragic flaw in great-granddaddy was that he was, aside from being not formally educated, he was also an alcoholic. So the story goes, and I got this from a female first cousin who had a slightly less, a female first cousin of my pawpaw's, William Jasper, and she had a slightly less romanticized view of the Mercer men. She said he was going to do a demonstration of the cotton picker to sell it to a big farm implement company, and the representatives of the bank and farm implement company came out to see the demonstration, and he showed up late and drunk and kind of made a jerk and an embarrassment of himself, and the sale didn't happen, and he wound up selling it cheaply to a brother-in-law who was a banker, who then sold it to someone else who sold it to McCormick, the large agricultural implement machine company. What else have I got about Kinsey? Puzzles, right. He, in addition to big things like that, he also made puzzles to entertain his kids with, and they were remarkable for their actual complexity but apparent simplicity. One was a block letter T out of wood, and none of the pieces had more than five or six sides. They were relatively simple pieces, but they were all cut at odd angles, and you think you're just going to immediately be able to do it in seconds, but it would take several minutes if you were a good puzzle person, and I wasn't, and I only managed to put it together once or twice in my life. I'd sit and fiddle with that silly thing for an hour and not be able to use all the pieces and get a perfectly block letter T. It was just remarkable that it could be that complicated and look that simple. The other one, I guess, didn't quite follow that mold. The other one that we had, that Daddy had, neither of them do we have now. They got lost in one of my parents' moves. But the other one that Sylvester had, my dad, was a wooden stick, and it had a hole in each end. It was a flat piece of board, real thin, but it had a hole in each end and two holes close together in the middle, and there was a string that went from hole number 1 to hole number 3, and another string that went overlapping it from hole number 2 to hole number 4, and the loops that those strings formed, that at the bottom of one loop there was a washer, a metal disc with a hole in the middle of it. And I think it was two strings like that. They had knots tied in the back of them so you could pull that loop tight, but you couldn't pull the string out. It's conceivable it was one string that with just two knots and just looped in the back. But I think it was two separate strings, so 4 knots in the back. But the goal, and there was a story that went with it that again was related to a life on the ranch or the farm, and this one had something about the washer was produce that you're trying to get to market, and the other string represented the market. But the goal was just to get the washer from this loop of string to that loop of string. And it looked completely physically impossible. And I spent hours working with that. I saw Daddy do it one time, I remember clearly, and I think that I actually got it done once myself. But after I'd done it, I didn't remember what I'd done, how I did it, at least not long enough to be able to do it again the next time I wanted to show someone. But all simple little homemade toys, and you never, you don't look at them and think immediately that that's going to be something remarkable. But the man was a genius. He died in his mid-70s, living in a spare bedroom of a younger brother who was, according to the female cousin of Jasper that I spoke to, the younger brother was the least bright of JW's 5 sons, the least gifted, but he was also the only one out of the 5 that was not an alcoholic. So he's the one that wound up with a small farm, a piece of land, his own home, and a place for his genius but fatally flawed older brother to live in his last years. And I remember his bedroom just being filled, the walls lined with empty old cigar boxes. One of the other things that I remember about him, that I also remember about Jasper, his son, my grandfather, whom I called Papa. I just called Kinsey, I just called Great Granddaddy. My grandfather, Jasper, I called Papa. But they were both, Kinsey and Jasper, really big on sharp knives. I guess that was an important part of life in the country on the ranch or farm. But if you showed up to visit them, you were expected to have a pocket knife, and they would ask you to pull it out and give it to them, and they would try to use it to shave the hair on their arm. If it would shave the hair on their arms smoothly, then you were an acceptable man, and you were taking proper care of your knife. If it wasn't, that was a shameful thing. You were supposed to keep that knife clean and literally razor sharp at all times. I think those are all of my memories and all the stories that I know about Kinsey. I turned off again.